of, all days we had to get drenched, but we are in a drought, so I am grateful for, the rain that we are getting. Just before we get started, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about the evening and what we're planning. So we're going to have a talk by Sameeta and Justin, our two artists tonight. And then following the talk, there are refreshments that our own Aliquot's Medway catering company has prepared for us. So we'll have a little reception, mingling, any question and answer session. We can have a question and answer session. And then down the hall in the conference room, Sameeta and Justin have hung up their artwork from this series. So please feel free to go in and out after the talk if you'd like to take a look at that, if you haven't already. And then I'll just do a brief intro so that those of you who are not familiar with this series or their work have a little bit of a context within which to listen to their talk. First of all, I'm really grateful to the Medway Cultural Council, Medway Marches, and the Metro West Community Foundation for their financial support of this event. We couldn't have done it without them. Before I start, I'd like to invite our Cultural Council Chair, Gail Hachenburg, to just come and say a couple words. And I see Jordan has walked in. So Jordan, did you want to say something with Gail, or?
Hi, it's Weather.
Hi, yes, we're all talking about.
Jordan and I are co-chairs of the Medway Cultural Council, and we provide programs and festivals community-wise. We've done the Pixie Festival for a number of years, it's annual, the Diwali Festival, various artist Spotlight. We've really done a lot throughout the years, so check us out on our website.
As well as the painting project.
I was just going to say, yes, Crystal was our guide and light through the painting of the utility boxes, and they came out spectacular, so we really have a lot to thank her for. Everyone that's pitched in, thank you so much. I'm glad you're here tonight. I won't talk long, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you for being here.
And thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna talk quickly. To introduce Sameeta and Justin McIntosh, our two artists, who will be talking to us tonight about their collaborative series, Nakshe Sukhan Saaz, Mark of the Word Maker. Sameeta is based in Karachi, Pakistan, and Justin is a resident of Cambridge, Massachusetts, having extensively traveled, of course. And they've both painstakingly learned traditional skills from their own cultures, whether that of calligraphy, religious iconography, or mystical practices, and applied them in their own contemporary creative art expressions. Sameeta and Justin's current collaboration is a visual art series that attempts dialogue at the edge of cultural and artistic boundaries. It weaves together the rich tapestry of script traditions from Pakistani heritage and the American experience encompassing Europe and the Americas, referencing calligraphic practices as well as their rebellious expressions in graffiti. Scripts represented include the Arabic-inspired Urdu, the undeciphered ancient Indus Valley Civilization script, Brahmi, Devanagari, and Avesta, Western Latin scripts, undeciphered Scottish petroglyphic writing, and layers of ancient scripts, both deciphered and undeciphered. Together, the artists craft a visual narrative that speaks to the shared human experience of seeking meaning and record through the act of script-based mark making. The artists also experiment with the act of copying or mimicking each other's script making as an act of cultural learning in this series. A final layer of their combined experiment takes a popular Urdu poem, Hamari Intihaye Shauk Kya Hai, about nation building and hope, which was translated into English by Sameeta, What is the Height of Our Passions? Inspired by her visit to the United States after a hiatus of many years, this piece pays homage to the spirit of social movements which she saw as having brought positive change in the country. Sameeta painted phrases from this poem in Urdu, and Justin did the same with the poem in English translation. And if you later go down and take a look at their works, you will see some of that. It reflects their mutual appreciation of the power of activism in building a positive and inclusive society for all. The artists envision a world where narratives converge, dialogues create new meanings, and art facilitates a process of ceaseless back and forth communication across traditional boundaries of East and West, facilitating cross-cultural fusion and appreciation. So that was from their own artist statement. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Justin and Sameeta, and I hope everyone enjoys their talk. And one more thing that I forgot to add is that we have Dale Freeman with us here tonight, and at the end of their talk, there is going to be a spoken word piece, that poem that I had referenced, and Dale will be providing an original improv musical accompaniment to the poem. So thank you all again for being here.
It's really great to be here. Thank you so much. My name is Justin McIntosh. This is my collaborator, Sameeta Presentation. And thank you so much for coming out in this weather. And we also really want to thank the Medway Cultural Council. We want to thank the Medway Public Library and also Medway Marches for helping to support this. And we have a talk here. What we're going to do is that Sameeta is going to go through some of her background, which sort of brought her up to this point, and talk for a little bit. Then I'm going to talk for a little bit about some of my background and my work, and then we'll merge the two, and we'll sort of talk about how we met and started collaborating, and then how this series came about. So we'll let Sameeta go first.
Thank you so much. I won't repeat everything Justin said, but I'm very grateful to all of you and to Medway Marches and our host, the Medway Cultural Council. So, without further ado, a little bit about myself. So it's great to be back here. I went to college here at Brandeis University. I got a Bachelor's of Fine Arts. Long time ago, I'm not going to say when, and I'll give some things away. But, and then I went on to get an architecture degree from UT Austin. But I've been sort of doing architecture, art, and also teaching at the university level on and off. And just to put my art in context, here's Pakistan, and I think I have a laser pointer here. So the work I do, I feel like, especially when I'm explaining it to a foreign audience, it really helps to see that Pakistan, before '97, this was all part of British India, the Indian subcontinent, and then Pakistan was carved out as a sort of a Muslim nation state from within that when the British left and the countries gained independence. So it's always, it has a very long history, and when people talk about South Asian history or the beginnings of Indian civilization, they often go back to the archaeological sites of the ancient Indus Valley civilization that are still in this. So it's a very, and it's, sorry?
Well, it's like they work.
Yeah, lights must be on.
No,
For camera.
Okay.
do you need lights?
Yeah, I thought because she's completely in dark.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so
So
here we
you can see
are.
it.
How are the visuals for everyone here with the lights on?
Yes, you don't hear now.
Okay.
Oh, you can't see it? Okay, you can go
So
up.
also geographically, this is sort of a gateway into, the gateway into the Indian subcontinent, because all of this is blocked by very high mountain ranges at the top, and then you've got this huge Arabian Sea all around. So this, what is present-day Pakistan, has been a gateway into India from Central Asia, from China, like one of the ancient Silk routes from China to the Arabian Sea was right through there. So in various periods of history that have left their mark, it's been an interesting, a multicultural kind of place. And the script I work with, Urdu script, also reflects that sort of multiculturalism. Let's go ahead and talk a a little bit more about it later with the work. This is some of my architectural design and conservation work, and then a little bit about my influences. So I grew up with a father who was trained, this is the post-colonial, post-colonial generation of professionals in Pakistan, right? He was born before, while the British were still in power, and when the first generation actually gets allowed to get professional degrees in architecture. The British didn't allow the natives to pursue a professional degree in architecture. They were allowed to be crossing, but not that. So he was part of that generation that allowed nation building projects, institutional projects, and he came to the US in the 50s to get his training. At that time there were no university programs in architecture. So he was a hardcore sort of like international style modernist. And I learned a lot about that from him. But my mother was more of a traditionalist, and she got me to be, even though I went to an English school, she got me special extra tutoring and the traditional calligraphy. Like this is a we call it a wooden board on which kids learn how to write with a pen, with a bamboo pen and ink, and then you it's a very ritualistic kind of practice. You put a layer of mud on it, then you practice on it, then wash it off the next day. It was, and I didn't know how much of an impression that was leaving on me. I was the last in my own family also to get that training, but there was an emphasis on aesthetics and form and getting it right, and I think that stayed with me. And also my mother was part of a Sufi order, she had a Sufi teacher doing the practices, ritual practices of Sufism. So as a child I remember going with her, and that left a lot of left a mark on me. And I was also part of that generation of postmodernists in the third world who was saying, let's reclaim tradition. It's okay, like the modernists had an international slogan, ornament is crime, do not reference tradition in your design, do everything in a modern way. But we sort of reclaimed in the 80s and 90s, reclaimed tradition. So that's another big influence. People now often ask me like what motivates you or how do you work in your studio, and I often say that both is sort of a logic about what I'm doing as well as something that I can't explain, something more intuitive. They both inform my work, and also because I'm a formal follower of Sufism, I sort of also feel like my work is informed by that. These are sort of different things I made as an artist over the years, and then these are some of the traditional scripts, variations of Arabic and Persian, different styles that I was influenced by. And then in my own work later, I've used like in this one, I've used a brush and watercolor inks to have a more expressive sort of instead of a rigid sort of a calligraphic form, a more expressive one. And this is a verse from Rumi's poetry, the original Farsi, that has been, and that's another poem in Urdu that's also rendered there. This is a series I'm working on, in which this is, sort of abstracted calligraphy of the original Farsi poems. And these are some photographs I took at Mevlana Rumi's shrine in Turkey, and I'm trying to pair these two things together, digital collage based on these photographs and also this calligraphy, so just to give you a taste. A series I did recently exhibited at National Gallery of Art Islamabad last year was this Unity of Being series, which took a major Sufi thinker, his concepts, and I felt like, in a lot of Asian traditions, the mystical or theological concepts are illustrated, but a lot of this thinking does not have a visual counterpart like in art. So I sort of took concepts from that and brought them into calligraphy, but also merged them with photography of the human body that I did. And for example, this is some calligraphy I composed. I projected it onto this model's body, made a digital collage of it. Then I printed out this collage and I worked by hand on top of it to do various writing in Arabic, Urdu, and English. Spirit, Body and Spirit is the name of it, Jism and Brew. So this is, it also incorporates some graffiti-esque work. Similarly, the 4 stages of the development of the self in Sufism, these 4, I sort of, you can see I try to make it visual. This is another, the way in the Bible there's, let there be light in Genesis. In the Quran it says, God said be, and it was. Those words are very iconic, so this is a calligraphy of that, and it's sort of worked onto the body. So this is also from the series. Another series where I collaborated with Naveed Bagani to bring concepts from science and Sufism together. So this is some of that work. This is another work where I've taken some Sufi poetry and the poetry in calligraphic form is actually making the form and commenting about current light of the planet. And now I'd like to invite Justin.
Welcome to my section of the evening. I won't go too much into my background as Sameeta did. I mean, maybe at bits and pieces, but I grew up also sort of outside of formalized education. So I never went to school as a child or even into college or anything like that. I was always sort of outside of those educational systems. And came here when I was 16 to the Massachusetts area and started sneaking into the School of the Museum of Fine Arts. And I had a lot of sort of computer skills early on, and I started using those, and that sort of led me into a world of graphic design work. And in graphic design, I became pretty fascinated with type. And I then went back to sort of study like why type in graphic design is the way it is, and it's of course because of the ways that type is set when you're printing. And when you learn about all these things, it sort of carries into graphic design. And in graphic design, there's also a playfulness about type, where you have to be very attentive to information that needs to be conveyed, and hierarchies of information, but you can also play with those forms of type in creative ways, which is often encouraged. And so I started playing with language in that way even when I was just sort of a late teenager in graphic design work, which I think was sort of one of the doorways to being really fascinated with language and script and type and how that can be used in multiple ways, multiple layers. I am trained in the last 10 years in traditional Christian iconography through the Russian tradition, which claims to have revitalized the Byzantine tradition. And through this study, I also became very interested in natural pigments and the materiality of work. So in this tradition, everything has to come from creation, and therefore you can't buy anything in an art shop. You have to make your own paint, you have to make your own gesso, you have to sort of do it all by hand because it has to come from the natural world. And we live in just a world of synthetics. And so that has been also a through line of fascination, also very recently. Iconography also has its own sort of inscription traditions, mostly in Greek and Russian, but also in Armenian and also in Arabic, and now modern art icons will also be inscribed in English. And you get some sort of very archaic things about using old letters, and there's a lot of abbreviations. There's also a very common thing in the ancient world where you don't have any vowels. You just put consonants in and ways of shortening inscriptions creatively, and there's all of this. So, there's a whole discipline here of deciphering iconography inscriptions. This is a series of work that I did when I was a resident at the 263 Gallery in Cambridge, where I was working with pieces of undeciphered scripts. And so this one, where's the pointer? This one, yeah. So this is a piece of script which is actually written right here of Rongo Rongo. So this is the script from Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, with all the big stone heads. And this script was in use up until Europeans first set foot on the island, and then very quickly they lost the script. And so there's lots of examples of it, but no one knows how to read it or write it anymore. And so the decipherment has been lost of that script. And then I took pieces of script. This is also Epi Olmec, which is the precursor to the Mayan script, which is at present undeciphered. And then I tried to render those pieces of ancient undeciphered script in a modern graffiti style, a modern graffiti form. And this is also sort of on this comment where I think graffiti, modern graffiti, is the main way that humans are sort of playing with language and playing with type as a visual form right now. And there's an interesting element of graffiti where once you start to stretch it, you can play with it to some extent to where it can be undecipherable by most people, but it should be readable by other graffiti writers. So if you stretch it too much, it's sort of considered not good. This is another piece in the same idea. I did it a little bit later, but this is a copy of a graffiti piece by a graffiti writer named Zephyr, who was one of the first people to start to stretch the letters. You can see they're pretty identifiable here, but he's starting to sort of add these little pieces, and from there it will really sort of stretch out. And so this is a copy of one of his pieces, but it's rendered authentically in the style of an illuminated European manuscript from somewhere like the 13th, 14th century. So this is on like calfskin vellum using real gold leaf and historic pigments to render this graffiti piece, which then is talking about sort of graffiti doesn't exist outside of the historical tradition of humans. It's very much connected to a historical tradition of humans playing with type, which going through a lot of European medieval manuscripts recently, it's amazing the creativity and playfulness with language that you can find just thumbing through pages now that they're being digitized and we can sort of thumb through them. This was some work that I did with a professor out on the West Coast, Professor Felicia Lopez, and she is a Nahuatl scholar, so she's a scholar of the Nahuatl language, which is the language of central Mexico that, Aztecs or Mixtecs would have spoken and also would have been used when Mixtec people communicated with Zapotec or Toltec people. It would have been sort of a lingua franca of central Mexico. And these were also, book people. They had libraries. Unfortunately, there's only a handful of manuscripts that remain from pre-contact with Europeans. And Felicia studies mainly one of those manuscripts from pre-contact, and I was doing digital tracings of that manuscript for her to then use in her linguistic work. There's a little element of her work here that I can point out, Sameeta thought was really interesting. So this image here, actually, for European scholars, use this as an example of cannibalism, because there's a human figure in a cooking pot here. But Felicia's work has shown that this whole panel actually is about childbirth and complications in childbirth. And the cooking pot is used as a metaphor for the womb. And that's consistent across many different things. So this, is a child still during pregnancy where there's some kind of a problem with the pregnancy. That's what this is displaying. So it was misinterpreted by Europeans, and now indigenous scholars are sort of coming back and reinterpreting these images from some of these manuscripts. There's a debate that Felicia is involved in as to whether or not this also is considered writing. And she is making the argument that there are elements of this that are even syllabic writing. And sometimes there will be a figure, but the elements on the shield that they are holding will phonetically spell out their name, or will phonetically spell out the name of a place or a village. And so it's very contentious in the academic world, but there's some argument that some of this is a form of writing, whereas kind of famously for the Americas, we generally only have the Mayan writing system as the sort of recognized true, writing system of the Americas. Recently, in the summer of 2023, I was living in Scotland and working on a project there where I was researching traditional natural pigments in Scotland, based off of an archaeological site in the far north in Orkney, which is up in the North Sea. There's an amazing site there called the Ness of Brodgar that last summer was their last year of excavation. So they've been excavating for 10 years. And they found a lot of paint at this site, in situ. So paint on stone, paint on ceramics, even a place they call the paint shop, because there was sort of so much pigment and so many little mortar and pestle stones still with pigment in it. Of course, before this, they used to field clean everything they would discover. And if you take a brush, any layers of 3,000-year-old paint are going to immediately dissolve. So it's not like other sites also probably didn't have it, but this one they're preserving it. And I was able to go visit Orkney and meet and work with Antonia Thomas, who's an archaeologist who's worked at that site and has done this cataloging of all of the signs and symbols that have been discovered across Orkney, which was really a center of culture in the Neolithic. So this is a thing you think about the British Isles. Culturally, it was kind of upside down in the Neolithic. Like Stonehenge is culture from Orkney. Orkney in the north was really the center where everyone would gather, and then their culture sort of spread south. And this is very current piece that I did, which was a taking of a poem and working, which you can see here in Arabic, and working it into square Kufic, which is a calligraphy writing form that came out of bricklaying and tile laying. It's very, very geometric and could be used architecturally. And there's also some element of this that's about a philosophy of even if people are illiterate, language can still be beautiful to them. And so we worked the poem into this form, and then it was painted as an architectural detail here inside of a home. And this was one of the things that Sameeta was involved in and consulted on, and then this was sort of one of the ways that we became connected together and started to explore this collaboration, this collaboration together, the mark of the word maker. So, Sameeta, you want to come back up here?
Sure. So you can see how Justin's been experimenting both with modern techniques as well as very traditional, taking traditional techniques, materials very seriously, the Russian iconography, and I found all that very interesting. But I was introduced from that last project he showed with the Kufic design, that commission he did. So that was an introduction, and then we got started talking about scripts and design, and the idea of this came that we could do something collaboratively, though we had no idea where to start or where to go with it. And so we, if you go to the next slide, and this was the same time I had come back after a hiatus of many years to the US, and I'd seen a lot of social change happening. So there's a song and a poem, and which became a song in Pakistan from many years ago that I translated into English at that time, and I shared that with friends, including Justin. And that was one layer that in our collaboration, I sort of painted on the Urdu of that, and he painted the English.
Yeah. And then this was another point, because then you
This was another point of meeting, because he had looked at the ancient Indus Valley script in his residency when he worked, and so just a little bit of a little bit of context. This is a map of present-day Pakistan. Has roughly the same boundaries as the ancient Indus Valley civilization, which was, one of the four earliest civilizations as ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, ancient China, and then in the Indian subcontinent we've got this. And these were all four riverine civilizations that had like very developed scripts, currency, weights and measures, games, jewelry, whatever, like developed technologies. And then, Justin was interested in their script, which was developed. And interestingly, this compared to, let's say, ancient Egypt, where you've got the pyramids, and then we don't see any signs of the common people's houses or anything, right? But here, like this city of Mohenjo-daro, from the civilization, had like a formal city planning. They had like a drainage water supply for all the homes in town, 200 wells spread across the city, and and the idea of the modular brick. As an architect, I found that amazing that they had this idea, the same brick that we use today, pretty much.
And
brown brick.
Out of the classical river valley civilizations, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and ancient China, all of their writing systems are very well known and deciphered at this point, but currently the writing system of the Indus Valley is still undeciphered.
Right, even though there are many scholars working on it. And so for the first layer, let's say, of our collaboration, these are four paintings. You can see them down the hall at the end of this lecture. I took this layer of the ancient Indus Valley script, right here, this red band here, that's an undeciphered script. But then there's also this sort of academic legend, I would say, because you can't really prove it 100%, that there's another script, Brahmi, which is a known script, which developed as a sort of successor to this ancient script. So there is some continuity, some meaning we can glean. And then this one is the very famous Devanagari script, which is used in classical Sanskrit, but to this day is used in modern Hindi, which might be, I don't know how many billions of people read this script every day. It's the official language. Hindi is the official language of India. So you can imagine the numbers of people, a very ancient classical script with, from a very, developed culture and a very developed grammar, and everything. That they say developed from the Brahmi script. So then another link. And then, so this is the script of modern day Hindi as well. And then I come to Urdu, which is, in Pakistan, that's a national language today. It's my language too. And pretty much Hindi and Urdu are both sister languages, or the same base language, same grammar and everything. But Urdu is sort of like, if you were to compare Yiddish and German, Yiddish is German grammatically, but they use the Hebrew script because they consider it a holy script, and then they also have lots of Hebrew words in Yiddish, but the grammar and syntax are totally Germanic. So there's a sort of a cultural affiliation that Yiddish has to Hebrew that it brought in, and similarly the Muslims of North India, they're speaking pretty much spoken Hindi, like we have Hindi speakers here, the Urdu speakers, and they can communicate with each other seamlessly. But the script has been adapted from the Perso-Arabic, we call it, an Arabic coming through the Persian language. And so we have that script, and then we have certain vocabulary also from Arabic, Farsi, Persian, Turkish even. So these Muslims who, you saw the map, they sort of trickled into the subcontinent, and they made this sort of conglomerate language, and even the word Urdu apparently means camp or something where people come together and create a lingua franca for themselves. So it was just an interesting, I thought this was like I layered these four, and then there was layers from the poem that I mentioned, and then Justin came, and you can talk about the layers that you
we'll go through some of the elements of the pieces, but not everything because we'll be here all night, right? Yeah. But we're going to talk about a couple little pieces that are in the work. This main piece here we have a laser pointer, in the black here, this is, like I said, this is Epi Olmec, and this is the ancient precursor to the Mayan script, which is considered sort of the only deciphered known writing system in all of the Americas. But the Olmec script is older, but at this point it's pretty much undeciphered. It's not, they know that Mayan came from this Olmec script, but it's so different that it's not been really deciphered hardly at all. And you can see this is just an inscription of what's inside of this mask, this jade mask, and so this piece here is what is then featured on this, which for me I think is just important to include because we exist in the Americas, and often the Americas kind of get overlooked with sort of classical art history. So I thought it's important to include, that the Americas also have their own systems of writing. Some of them, like the Quipu in Peru, of recording information with knots and string, and very sort of innovative, creative systems of record keeping and communication.
So Justin painted that with a brush, right? The Epi Olmec, you painted it with a sort of a calligraphic hand with pigmenting.
And this other piece here, which says passion in English, but this was inspired by this somewhat modern trend of calligraffiti, which is now that sort of graffiti has grown up and sort of branched out and also become very global. There's numbers of graffiti writers that are turning back to their traditional calligraphy traditions and then writing with calligraphy. People may have seen there's actually a wall in Central Square in Cambridge that's done in this calligraphy style, but it's a whole wall of a building. It's really quite beautiful. So this was inspired by that sort of very modern trend of this interplay between traditional script writing and very modern graffiti writing.
I'll take the pointer from you. And then these are the layers I've painted, and these broad red brush strokes. They say this word shock. Again, that's from the poem for passion. And this is also some Urdu calligraphy representing these words here. So Justin and I, we sort of went back and forth. Like I would do a layer and then deliver the set of paintings to him. This is all on paper, and a lot of it is you used these black inks. You can tell me more about it, and then we also used some paint. But I would do a layer, deliver the package to him, then he'd sort of, contemplate what to do, and then he'd return the set back to me. So we worked in these layers, and we had no idea where it would go. And also the idea of
thinking about sort of the layers of interaction, and that there's always layers of history that build all of us, and layers of information and layers of knowledge, and how. I've also been thinking of it sort of like an archaeological dig, where you go down and then there's another layer, and then there's another layer beyond that, and then it's, then it's Phoenician, and then it's this, and then it's that.
Right. And the word palimpsest, for example, is for that, the layers and layers of documentation on a stone, maybe from different periods, and you can sort of see traces from the older layers. So we use that to name some of the work. And also the idea of them deciphering script, because he was coming up with scripts I was not familiar with. So my own scripts, I think of them have a utilitarian kind of relationship to my own scripts. I know what they mean, what every letter means. But when I'm seeing something completely new, I'm reacting to it as if it's a more of an aesthetic, a formal kind of element, and I'm thinking about the painting on the whole, and
And vice versa,
yeah. So it's some things I'm doing with a purpose and meaning, and some things I'm doing just as an intuitive response, aesthetic response. And this, we also were, reading the news a lot while this thing was happening. So on some of the paintings, we've got also, this is from an Urdu newspaper in Pakistan. This is from a newspaper in Cambridge and in Boston. That these layers came up. And it was a funny detail that when I was sending this to the framers, a guy calls me and says, "Ma'am, I just opened the packet you gave me, and I'm sorry, but there's some bits of newspaper has gotten stuck on this. So I'm really sorry. I don't know who in my workshop did that."
Yeah, we're also thinking about how we are also in the age of print. We're just very much in the age of print. To the point where very few of us, especially young people, write by hand almost at all anymore.
Right.
And so it's also just an acknowledgement that we are in the world that we're in, and there's such a rich tradition of handwriting and calligraphy and expression through language and script that it's difficult to interface with if you have no experience of writing and art making.
And here's Justin had taken this picture of himself at the beach writing this, several years ago before we ever did this project, and then he worked on this layer here. These are some samples from the ancient Indus Valley script on seals and stamps and such.
Most of these are seals and stamps, some of which we just saw today. We were at the Museum of Fine Arts this afternoon, and they were able to bring out some of the collection that they had from the Indus Valley. We got to see some of these little seals close up.
And if they actually did a dig in a site which is in modern day Pakistan in the 1930s.
Hachenburg.
Hachenburg, which is interesting. So here's another script which doesn't get talked about much, Avesta, which is from the Zoroastrian holy book today. Is still called the same as a script, and it's the ancient Persian language before the Muslims came there. This is the script they would use, and this is me experimenting with writing it. The word Ahura Mazda I've written in red here in the background, right there. And I thought it was interesting, like the way I write Urdu, like there's layers of Urdu here in black. Intersecting with Justin's epialmag. So a bit of an improv jazz thing going on here, maybe. But I thought there was sort of parallels in the way, there was some sort of horizontal order to the Avesta, and also the sort of squiggles and cursive kind of forms to it. Interesting parallels. And then here's also some Urdu and English and
Lines from the poem.
yellow. There's a yellow cursive and with paintbrush that Justin did, and then I made the mess in red. You can talk about this one.
So my youngest brother, a few years ago, got married, and his wife is from North Vietnam, and so we went over to the wedding, and one of the things I became really fascinated with in Vietnam was Vietnamese calligraphy, because in Vietnam they used to use the Chinese characters, and for 1,000 years they were also kind of occupied by China, and everything was Chinese, and their arts were Chinese, so their calligraphy was all Chinese calligraphy. But when they switched to the Latin script in Vietnamese, they kept the Chinese brush calligraphy, which is also written vertically, but they just do it with Latin characters now. And in Vietnamese, every syllable is a word. So Vietnam is 2 words in Vietnamese. So it's also these sort of short words which can easily be stacked on top of each other and written vertically, which they do with a brush. So it's a quite a fascinating way that the style remained even though the script changed. And they have this very different calligraphy style than most of the rest of the world that uses Latin, Roman-based characters.
Right.
Um,
So you did that in that style, right? Like
Yeah, it's sort
saying,
of loosely inspired by that, because I felt like this phrase, tell me now, tell me true, was also those sort of short words that could be stacked on top of each other. And then this is from the iconography tradition. This is in Cyrillic, the word passion, written in sort of this style as if it's an inscription, labeling the painting.
So this is this was an experiment. We didn't show everything, but down at the conference room you can see the original paintings that we were just discussing here. And just moving forward, Justin and I found this so interesting that we have had sort of some interesting insights into finding some commonalities between our respective traditions, like the Sufi interpretation of Islam or the Quran. For example, this one saying that we have, I was telling you about it, read the Quran with the Quran, pray al-Quran with the Quran. So what does that mean? So the concept, as they explain, is that one is the book, the physical book in your hand, that's the Quran, the holy book. But then the universe, the cosmos, is another Quran. And then you go out into the world, you learn something, you come back to the book, and it'll give you more insight, and vice versa. So and the human being a microcosm of the macrocosm, that also sort of is reflected in that. And then I was telling Justin that, and then he told me about this, the Celtic saying.
The big book and the small book. So we know that Christianity first came up the coast to Ireland and the west coast of Scotland, officially in the 4th century, although there's oral history that goes back all the way to the 2nd century. And that the monks who brought Christianity up were Coptic monks from Egypt. And so there is this period of Celtic Christianity, which sort of goes from the 2nd to like the 8th, 9th century before it's sort of stamped out. But they had this concept of the big book and the small book. And the small book was the Bible, but the big book was creation, was nature, and how it sort of folded into a Celtic worldview of looking outside in order to look inside in a sort of a similar way.
So it was like amazing to hear about these parallels, conceptually about how even the Holy Scripture is seen, and more mystical interpretations than what literal kind of fundamentalist interpretations might give you.
Yeah.
And then another one, he also was telling me about the Russian icon and how his teachers have told him that it's both the icon is both a mirror and a window. Symbolically, if you're on the spiritual path, it can give you those openings and such. And then I told him about an Urdu. It's a line from an Urdu Sufi poem which says, and this analogy of the heart as a mirror keeps coming up in Sufi poetry, and that you have to really go back and polish the mirror of the heart to be able to really progress. It's not about some. It's more of a mystical or inward-looking practice that they talk about, the Sufi interpretation. So we were amazed by these parallels, and we are also collaborating further. So just to give you a taste of our common themes that we found very fulfilling to exchange.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked a lot now.
That's it.
So thank you so much for listening.
So now we'll just do a quick little recitation of the poem together.
Accompanied by Gail Freeman here.
क्या है हमें हर रात गुजर पहचान लेगी हमारी इंतहाई शौक क्या है हमें हर रात गुजर पहचान लेगी
Tell me now, tell me true, what is the height of our passions? What is the farthest point where we will meet when the suffering, the party, the battles, the day of drudge is over? Every route we take, every pathway we forge through together shall know us as if we were its own.
हमारी आरज़ू क्या है कि हम अपनी रगे जामे वफा के रंग भर लाएं हमारी आगाही हमको बनाती है नई शमें जलाती है हमारी राहें हमको बनाती है नई शमें जलाती है children of the new today
We shall be, and when we falter, we shall learn. What else is life but the self becoming known? Self knowing itself.
हमारी इंतहाई शौक क्या है हमें हर राह गुजर पहचान लेगी हमारे सामने मंजिल निशान है नई सुबह हमें फिर जान लेंगी हमारी इंतहाई शौक क्या है जब बादों की जमीन पर चाहतों के फूल खिलते हैं चाहतों के फूल खिलते हैं कोई आंधी कोई तूफान कभी रास्ता ना रोके हमें फिर भी यकीन है जब हमारे दिल से हरदम एक ही आवाज आती है
What is the height of our passions? Tell me, where can it take us? What we like and love, what we know to be right and true, can take us beyond to better worlds, with our pulse tied to the promise of the vast sky above. We should
take it forth.
Each path we dare to take, calling us its own. Each brave step inspired with ideals close to heart, painting the future, lighting lamps for others. A new tomorrow we will build with our own passions hitherto unknown. What is the height of our passions? Tell me, where can it take us?
हमारी इंतहाई शौक क्या
What
है
is the height of our passions?
हमारी इंतहाई शौक क्या है हमें हर राह गुजर पहचान लेगी हमारे सामने मंजिल निशान है नई सुबह हमें फिर जान लेगी हमारी इंतहाई शौक क्या है हमें हर रात गुजर पहचान लेगी हमारे सामने मंजिल निशान है नई सुबह हमें
We're going to record that song and play it, start adding it to like Spotify. Seriously.
All of Dale's hard work, right?
Thanks for bearing
Dale,
with
you
us.
should stand up and take a bow. One rehearsal, and he produced that, so good
That's a jazz improv musician for you. That's good.
That was, thank you.
And he's singing in Urdu now.
My singing was certainly an improv. That was.
So thanks again, guys. Appreciate your.
Anyone have any questions?
Yes, please,
Yeah.
any questions?
That we can answer. Yeah.
Or ones we can answer.
What's next? Well, we're exploring materials and methods. I think those ideas we shared, those conceptual ideas, meeting points, I guess I would call them, they're sort of driving us, I think, and we're, one of the things we just had a meeting with the curator of the MFA, looking at some original material from their archives, you know, which are script-based, and so we found some of those inspiring, and we hope to work on that.
And this interplay of nature, we're thinking about sort of nature and language and how those two can play together in sort of conceptual ways.
Gail, you have?
Yes, I just had a quick question. How do we follow just the, you have artists' websites, I know you do some, Justin, you have one as well?
Yes, so our websites are both here and our Instagrams are also both here, which we use for posting art-related things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have something to say. So,
Yes, please.
so when I was going through online, what I found was right now in the internet, they are saying Urdu has its roots to Arabic, as opposed to, and the rest of the ancient languages have their roots to the Devanagari script, the Brahmi script. So your work is very significant in the sense like you actually give evidence of all of that has to one ancient root. So how can you guys make it more available on the internet, where when you just search it, where your work comes up? It's not a question, I just want to say this work should go out more. Is what I'm saying.
Thank you for appreciating it in that way.
Yeah.
And I feel like I, as an architect too, who was interested in conservation work and studying historical sites in Pakistan, I was exposed to, like, you know, the scripts of all these different periods of history, and I was very interested in that. So and then reading about those theories that they say that, you know, even if we can't decipher an ancient script, it's a progenitor or whatever, to later scripts. So it makes a wonderful narrative of wanting to claim them in a modern way. So that was interesting. But I think the other question is a bit IT related as to how to do more.
Also, we're, at this point, we're very research based, but we're still artists. We don't necessarily have the credentials of a historian or a linguist. But I do think that within these sciences and methods of investigation, there is some opening up of working with artists and people of different disciplines. So, it's in some ways it's a different role, perhaps. But in other ways, I think there are ways to connect it. And it was fascinating actually being on Orkney, because the archaeologists, they have an artist in residence at the archaeological dig. And they were very much, they're like, oh, you're an artist, please come, and like, we'll show you the dig, and we'll meet with you. And it was quite fascinating how they're sort of folding in other people and ideas and disciplines. Also because they're, of course, finding within the field of archaeology all of this evidence of art making. And so they want sort of this exchange with people.
Right, and I think that's a trend in like museum curation as well, like the MFA curator we met today. They're very interested in what contemporary artists are doing. Often they commission work from contemporary artists in response to their historical collections. So that's another strand of it. But I think the artist becomes, represents something for society, at least as a role that the artist has. I'm standing here because you see that you're ready to listen to an artist for some reason. I've become a spokesperson for something cultural. And I think in a time where there's like fascistic kind of trends all over the world, which claim history in very peculiar ways, very
Rigid ways.
narrow and rigid ways. I think the artist can be a sort of spokesperson for multiculturalism, recognizing the different layers of our identity creation, or what makes up modern culture today. And I think that in this country too, there's a sort of consciousness that we need to recognize various layers of culture.
Maybe an anthropologist or a historian, if they start accepting your work, then the historical forums should receive your work and they can give recognition or something.
Always open to that. So why don't you join us for some...
Any other questions before we have some refreshments? Feel free to come up afterwards.
Yeah, we can give you more.
Thank you.